Both the aged care sector and the advice sector have gone through royal commissions and other significant developments which are impacting both of their operation quite significantly. Joining me today is Rob Lavery from the knowIt group to discuss what's going on in this arena. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Darren.
I thought I'd start by asking you about the Aged Care Royal Commission and what some of the revelations were and what sort of advice implications there might be.
Well, I think sadly some of the greatest revelations have been around the poor level or neglect of care towards the residents in facilities, which is shocking in many ways. But I think from a financial advice point of view, one of the things that's been coming up through the witness testimonies is that some of the largest financial decisions that people going into care need to make are being made under duress, under very stressful circumstances with very short time frames. And in fact, some of the witnesses have been describing it that patients have been making the largest financial decisions of their life in the hospital parking lot.
Wow.
And I think what it shows is that some forethought and pre-planning around aged care is essential to give people at least some sort of strategy approaching their entry into care, as well as potentially the system needs to change to allow greater time to permit major financial decisions to be made.
Mm-hmm. So we're looking at advisors looking after clients in this space. What do they need to change about how they're going about it? Is it just a matter of having the conversation a little bit earlier?
I think an earlier conversation is certainly valid, and there's certainly appetite for it. There was research conducted or commissioned by ASIC, for which a report was released in August, that outlined what consumers were looking for in terms of financial advice, amongst a number of other things. And one of the really striking pieces of information there was the fifth most sought after reason to get advice or to potentially seek advice in the future is around aged care planning. Mm-hmm. So clients clearly have an appetite and want to seek out pre-planning ahead of time as well as when the event arrives.
Mm-hmm. So that takes care of the Aged Care Royal Commission. We've also obviously recently had the Banking Royal Commission, which has had implications for the advice sector as a whole. But what might this mean for the aged care advice area?
Yeah, I mean, there's a mass of regulation and change coming down the pipeline for all financial advisors, and both those Royal Commissions really need to be viewed in combination with the Productivity Commission reports that came through, with the LIF reforms, and with the reforms that are being overseen by FASEA. And one of the large overarching themes of all these reforms and recommendations is that advice that is product-driven is going to be harder to do in a commercial sense, but also it's not going to be the focus for clients going forward. And services that are more goals-based or are more product agnostic, such as aged care advice, are going to become quite central to advisors' practices.
Mm-hmm. You just touched on FASEA there. That's obviously a massive change that's happening throughout the advice sector as well. That's obviously around educational standards and codes of conduct and that sort of thing. Now, aged care advice is a very specialised area. What sort of implications are there for advisors who want to service clients like this?
Yeah, and that's a good question. Aged care advice has long fallen off the radar of regulation to some degree because it isn't product driven. So it didn't turn up under the RG 146 regime, and it's pretty absent as well under FASEA's education and reforms. But it doesn't mean that it's not valid. Just because the regulations focus on product-driven advice doesn't mean that specialisations such as aged care aren't incredibly important for advisors going forward. And it doesn't mean that the process itself of meeting these FASEA requirements won't involve aged care advice. The master's degree that I just completed had an aged care subject in it, and CPD will continue to have aged care in it. It's still going to have a very prominent place in training and education for financial advisors.
Look, as a result of all these developments, advisors who are looking to provide aged care services or perhaps are currently advising people on this subject, do they have to fundamentally change what they're doing?
Some may. I think not all do. Some have very round practices as it is. I think one of the important things advisors need to look at is to view aged care as broader than just residential aged care, which has been a tendency in the past. there's a number of options available to clients these days when it comes to getting further care, whether it be in the home or residential. Things like the Commonwealth Home Support Program, home care, retirement communities, community nursing. These are all things that advisors need to be familiar with to really provide good guidance to their clients on their aged care needs.
Now, we've just talked about a raft of changes. I'm assuming with that comes the opportunity to get ahead for some advisors?
Absolutely. As I touched on earlier, that ASIC research showed very clearly the opportunities that are in the aged care space. A desire for aged care advice ranked higher than super switching, it ranked higher than estate planning, it ranked higher than a need for insurance advice.
Wow.
So the appetite is there, and for advisors who are willing to become experts in the field, there's a great opportunity for them to increase their services that are available to their clients.
Rob will be one of the presenters on the Financial Observer Beyond Retirement Summit, and he'll be talking in a lot more depth than what we've just done about some of the topics that we've just discussed. If you're interested in registering and attending the event, have a look at the details on screen now. That will give you the website or the online address to go to register. We're presenting half days in Melbourne and Sydney, so find out a little bit more about that. The agenda's on that page too, and hopefully put in your registration for those days in October. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Rob.
Thanks, Darren.